Fnatic versus the KOO Tigers. You already said it, Monty. There's so many questions around these two teams based on their performances so far in this tournament, and we're not really certain how they're going to clash, but I'll be damned if we don't try to figure it out. So let's dive into the series at hand. Fnatic versus the KOO Tigers, and we have to start with this top lane matchup. Smeb versus Huni. Smeb 4-0 on that Fiora coming out of the quarterfinals. Can Huni answer it?
That's going to be a great question because he played some of the best Fiora I've ever seen. It's a very good champion just to be blind picking. You can pretty much do whatever you want with it right now. And we have to remember that when we look at Huni's champion pool too, we've seen him have a very impressive Riven. But Smeb is a guy who's gotten pentakills in Korea on Riven, so another very, very talented player. I'd give Smeb the edge in this matchup.
Yeah, if you look at the graphic on your screen, it looks like Smeb's one of those 1, 2, 3 trick ponies, but that's only because he wasn't pressured in his champion pool at all. He could pick Fiora 4 times in a row. He has multiple champions still available to him to play, like that Riven, for example. But on the other side of the coin, I think Huni and Reignover have gotten a lot better. Fnatic didn't play as much around Huni in the later stages of playoffs and the early stages of group stage, but Reignover has consistently been in the top side of the map, really helping Huni, and I think that's where the difference can be made.
I think they're really playing around Huni now, though. You look at taking that support, or the 80 cannon, that's cutting out damage for crowd control so that Huni can play carry top laners. I think this top lane matchup is incredibly crucial for each team.
I was going to say, it's funny enough because the statistic we have around the damage dealt by these top laners, Smeb, 26% of this team's damage, while Huni only 23.7, still very high in both regards, but the KOO Tigers actually relying a little bit more for damage coming from Smeb.
Yeah, I think this top lane meta is really coming into full force towards the end of Worlds, where teams are realizing how much a top lane can really influence. But at this point, it really isn't a pure 1v1 lane.
No.
So I don't think the argument can really be made for Smeb and Huni because they're both very talented. They're going to pick a skill match up top. It's not going to be some farm fest. And now it relies on how good is the synergy between top and jungle. And right now I think Reignover has a big advantage in this 2v2, and that's where it's going to swing, and I don't see anyone being able to survive that 1v2.
Let's bring the two of those junglers into question then. Reignover and Hojin, my goodness. Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. Yesterday we spoke so much about what is the impact of Gragas being disabled going to have. Well, Hojin hasn't even played it yet this tournament.
I mean, he hasn't, and I think that Reignover is a little bit more reliant on Gragas, unless his Lee Sin has gotten a lot better. From the time when I used to watch him play in Korea, I think Hojin does have an advantage. Hojin is also a player who has some really weird jungle pocket picks, and I think that might be a big factor today, too.
At the same time, in their match against KT, we saw Hojin kind of get exposed by score a little bit. Later on in the teamfights, he did better, but the early game just didn't have the same impact for me, and I think Reignover has shown on multiple jungles, including Gragas, that he's just a smart player, so I don't think it matters what he'll be playing. Fnatic have usually been playing to champion strengths and weaknesses, not really playing the same way with every single champion, so they really respect different jungle picks, and it should, in that theory, be fine. But I'm just wondering what is he going to pick if the jungle does get pinched, because we saw that yesterday. Sometimes 2 or 3 junglers can fall out, and then you're suddenly playing Jarvan, maybe Evelynn. Can he do it?
But it's more of, can Hojin abuse this?
Yeah.
That's always been Fnatic's weak point, was the jungle. That's what you'd point to as the weakest of this strong team. And now we're looking at a jungler who's also the weakest on their team. Will it really matter? Will that actually be a weak point now on Fnatic, or will it just be completely covered up by the matchup?
Well, that too, their playstyles seem to be slightly different, right? As we mentioned, we saw Hojin sitting in lanes quite a lot against Score, looking for the counter ganks, not able to find them all of the time, whereas Reignover, happy to farm away, invade the enemy jungle. He actually is the jungler here at the tournament who has the most time spent in the enemy jungle, which is just indicative of the fact that he's like, you can sit in lanes, I'm just going to take your farm.
But there's risk to both of those styles, right? You can get caught out in the enemy jungle, or you can waste time not farming like Hojin does. So I think it really is about the success of Hojin's ganks, which have not been very successful so far.
Yeah, and then I want to move to the mid lane, Fevvin versus Kuro. This is a matchup that's very interesting to me, only because I'm not sure how much we've seen out of Kuro yet this tournament.
Yeah, I think Kuro has really gotten easy way up in this point in the tournament. Hasn't really been exposed. I rate Fevvin as a higher player, but the problem right now with a lot of these mid lane matchups is that even if the input is different, you have a really good player here, you have a slightly worse player opposing to him, because it's such a wave clear heavy meta, just a lot of ranged utility champions being played. The output is still exactly the same. They might just go even on CS, so it'll take a lot longer to really show who's the better player. Mostly, it'll be decided in teamfights.
Yeah, and that said, Kuro has not been really tested, right? He had a couple poor games against Maple. Nagde really didn't show up in the quarterfinals to a large degree. But Huni also, this is a player who's made it through this tournament without a lot of tests in the top lane, and now it's Smeb. So there's going to be, for Kuro, there's going to be a big difference, I think, from what he's faced in Febvivin. And for Huni, there's going to be a big difference between what he's faced and Smeb.
Well, we talked about the top lane difference being a big influence. I actually think the mid lane is really important in this. We talked about Reignover being in the enemy jungle. What's the best way to get to the enemy jungle safely? Is going to be a lane that's pushing.
Yep.
This mid lane is going to be pushing. Fnatic's going to win mid lane. That's the entrance into their jungle that's safe. And now Smeb has to deal with someone behind him and a guy in front of him. That's not the best position that you want to be in.
Well, we've hit 3 of the lanes, or 3 of the positions. It's only a matter of time then until we make it to the bot lane. Looking at the AD carries, Reckless versus Prey here. They have a very interesting champion pool difference in that both teams seem to be prioritizing supportive or
utility
like AD carries, but they've fallen onto very different ones.
Right, and Prey has been playing a lot of the AD Kennen and solo queue, so I think we should assume that he's going to be able to play it here tonight. But Prey and the KOO Tigers, 10 games so far. Ashe has been picked or banned in 8. Since Reckless started playing AD Kennen, it has been either picked, banned, or picked away in the first round of the red side draft by an enemy in every single game. So these are going to be very, very important champions for both of these teams that like to use the AD carry to provide CC.
Yeah, this Kennen pick adds another layer to the pick and ban phase because you can just steal it away. Worst case, you put Smeb on Kennen.
Or Gorilla.
Or Gorilla on Kennen. So many roles it can fill. I'm pretty sure Prey has played it. Even if he doesn't like playing it himself, he now has learned more about the matchups and how to exploit it. And I think that's a big thing about pocket picks. You don't necessarily need to play yourself, but if you play it a couple of times in solo queue, in scrims, then you start learning the weaknesses, and then you can act on those weaknesses. So perhaps we'll actually see this Kennen pick come out from Fnatic, but then be exposed by the KOO Tigers.
I actually think Prey practicing Kennen really messes Fnatic up a lot. Because now they have to be taking it as priority. And now that you're taking it as priority, you're playing it against an AD carry who's been spamming it. So it's no longer a comfort pick that you can abuse because it's niche. It's this is an exposed pick now. This guy plays Kennen. He also plays the Ashe that we talked about, which I think fulfills the utility role better than Kennen does. So they're going to have to spend a ban on Ashe and then take Kennen early, which I think is kind of bad for Fnatic.
One thing I'm going to keep my eyes on is when the laning phase kind of ends around 10-15 minutes. Very often we see the support starting to roam. That's actually when Reckless has been caught out a few times, even with the vision on the side of Fnatic, and I haven't really seen that so much from Prey. That is another thing about this matchup. We're talking AD carry supports, but later on in the game when they're actually on an island, especially since both teams are so top-heavy focused, I want to see if Fnatic plays with their vision just a little bit better because Reckless, on Sivir, he had that game where he died a couple of times defending a tower he really shouldn't have.
Yeah, well, I'm also curious, though, how these utility AD carries actually go up against each other. We haven't seen too many examples yet in World so far of a Kennen against an Ashe, right? We've seen Kennen against Tristana, Kennen against Jinx, or Ashe against those champions. The two of them going up against each other, Krepo, do you have an opinion on which one of those is the more powerful?
I mean, they really enable TPs very well, all these utility AD carries, because the main counterpart to TPs is, well, by the time you land, people have peaced out. They don't want to fight anymore. The other problem is just bot lane is so... People respect TP so much that there's really no action anymore. We've almost seen almost none solo kills, 2v2 kills anymore in this tournament, barring just maybe major mistakes and overreaching. So I think we'll just see a passive lane until they group up for team fights. Maybe earlier team fights because you can really use that engage potential and the CC potential from some of these champions. I mean, it's fine to group with an Ashe on level 6 for a dragon fight and just make a pick and then get the dragon, for example.
Now, holistically, when we look at these teams, Monty, we look at KOO Tigers as being an exceptional best-of-5 team. We've seen them innovate. We've seen them succeed going down a couple games in a best-of-5 and come back. How does that compare to Fnatic's ability in a best-of-5?
See, I'm a little bit more skeptical of Fnatic in a best-of-5. They had such a great, wonderful best-of-1, 18-0 in the European LCS. But my opinion of Fnatic is they have usually one really highly polished strategy that is they're absolutely amazing at. And it's not that they just have one strategy. They have other strategies. They're just not at the same level. And KOO is such a flexible team. They've gone on 8, 10 best-of-3 win streaks in Korea at different times. When they settle in, they're very good at adapting in a best-of series. So I think that's a nice strength for them. And I promise you, tonight they're going to do something weird because they are very willing to try new things.
I've been waiting for something weird, Monty. All right, Krepo, what do you have for me?
Hopefully nothing weird.
Nothing weird.
Now, just looking at Fnatic, they have been so good at really neutralizing their opponents with a couple of key bans. Though, if you go back to like the Unicorns of Left series in EULCS, they had the same 3 bans, I believe, through the entirety of the series. So in that sense, they're so good at prepping for opponents. They just need to speed up that process so they can do that multiple times within a bit of best of 5. And I think that could actually happen today. I think the pressure from Worlds, just having ramped up, having had a week to prepare for KOO Tigers, who have already shown some things, I think Fnatic should be prepared for the best of 5.
I mean, I don't know how well KOO can adapt in this series. Because what they need to be adapting is back to how they played group stages and away from how they played in bracket. And if you...
They need to get worse opponents?
That's a different way to put it. But you see them in bracket stage and their warding doesn't go out. That's indicative of they don't snowball right now. Maybe that's just like habits coming back or something, but
that's the way they've always played, man. I don't know what to tell you. They come back from behind.
But I'm telling you, in this meta, the aggressive team is going to be in the advantageous spot. So it's going to be on Fnatic to make accurate plays because they're going to be the ones into the enemy jungle. But now it's just, is Fnatic going to be overreaching, overstepping, misplaying? And will KOO punish that?
Yeah, I agree. I think if KOO's going to win tonight, we do have to see the KOO we saw in the group stage. I mean, just statistically, in groups, they were up 5,700 gold at 20 minutes. Against KT, they were down 2,000 on average. So that has to change for them to win.
All right, we'll see if they can do that. Now, as our last semifinal gets underway, now's your time to ask any pressing questions that have been popping up about the teams or the games you've seen at Worlds so far. You can ping the desk by tweeting at LoL Esports with the hashtag AskTheDesk. We'll be pulling a few later for our panel here of trusted league experts to answer a little later in the day. And probably. Now, before I turn to you guys for your predictions on this matchup, I want you to hear what Prey thinks of Fnatic's home field advantage.
솔직히 응원을 하는 건 이렇게 그 팀이 그 경기 내에서 잘하고 있고 슈퍼플레이를 했기 때문에 이렇게 훈이 이러는 거라고 생각하기 때문에 저희가 그 경기에서 많이 잘해서 거기를 좀 도서관처럼 만들어 버렸으면 좋겠네요.
He wants to make the place a library. That's a tall order. I'm not sure if the audience here is going to let him do that.
It actually was a library at the end of yesterday.
Yep.
Well, today's a totally different series, Monty, and I won't be playing librarian, so please, everyone, be as loud as you possibly can be. All right, but with this in mind, let's get down to brass tacks. Who's advancing to the finals, and whose world run ends today? Probably.
Like I said, I think the meta favors the aggressors. I think KOO, that's the team I'm talking about right now, has not shown that they can match the aggression early yet. I think the top lane is pretty even, but I think mid lane is going to be the swing vote for the laning phase. And I don't know. I don't think KOO can keep up. I think it's going to be a nice 4-game spree, but it'll be Fnatic in the end.
All right, so you're calling it 3-1 in favor of Fnatic. Yes. There it is. Monty.
I have spent all week agonizing about this particular matchup because I am so unsure as to who's going to take this. I think that there are obvious strengths and flaws to each of these teams, but I think that the KOO Tigers are going to win this 3-1. Oh yeah, so crowd's with me. KOO! KOO! Yeah, that's right. KOO Tigers 3-1. I think that Smeb is going to outclass Huni, and that's going to be the ticket to victory.
Crepo's the tiebreak.
I'm going to need to reveal Monte Cristo as a liar here. He's talking about how he analyzed these teams the entire week, but I found your prep, Monte Cristo, and it was actually very, very simple overall. If you can't see this quite here, that's how he does his prep.
Yep, that's true.
5 Koreans, therefore they will win, but you're wrong, Monte Cristo. 3-1 for Fnatic. Easy peasy.
3-1. Well, according to my analysts, it's going to be 3-1 either way, but tipped in favor of Fnatic, the hometown favorites here. As we hand it off to our casters for the call, we'll take a closer look at how 2 friends are about to reunite on the world stage, but only one will walk away a world finalist.